Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to do some resist dyeing in yarn. Now lately I have been doing resist dyeing where I have been adding resist, maybe zip ties onto our yarn, dyeing it in a deep color, and then after removing those resists to expose white sections of yarn, I will then dye those remaining white sections a different color to create our colorway. But the way I used to do things was to dye our bright underlayer color first, then add the resists on those areas where I wanted to preserve the color, and then over dye it in the deeper color. And so I think I'm actually going to do things both ways and think about why I may or may not prefer one way versus the other. So as we jump on in, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. This basin is about half full of water, maybe, let's say around between 8 and 16 cups approximately. Let's add 3, 4, 5 tablespoons of white vinegar. The vinegar I'm using is 5% acetic acid, but my tap water does start a little bit more acidic, so you may find that you need to use more acid than what I show. Now to this basin, I'm bringing 400 grams of Knit Pick Stroll Fingering Weight yarn, and I had already pre-soaked this yarn for a couple of hours in some plain tap water. I'm debating adding a little more acid, but I don't think that it's gonna be necessary. I think we should be good. Just moving it around. And very shortly we can go ahead and start dyeing on this, but I am gonna want to prepare and mix some acid dye colors before we get started. And if you're new to my videos, the reason why we add acid is because the class of dyes that we use to dye yarn, and by the way, this is Knit Pick Stroll Fingering Weight yarn. It is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. The class of dyes that I'm using to dye this superwash wool nylon blend are acid dyes. And so they need to be in an acidic environment with the eventual application of some heat for the dyes to bind to our yarn. But for now, I'm going to set this aside and let's play around with our first round of dyes. For our bright colors, we're going to play with 3 primary Jacquard acid dye colors. We have Hot Fuchsia, which is a fluorescent pink. We have Turquoise, and then we have bright yellow. Now, of these colors, these are 2 that take a little bit longer to strike to the yarn and could be bleeders. Which is not why I picked them today. I picked them because I had these dye stocks already made, but I don't know if it would cause an issue when we go to our second over dyeing stage, but I want to mix enough of the colors so that way we have enough of the dye to use for our dyeing with brights before the resist and then dyeing with brights after the resist. I want to mix a nice green, purple, and blue. And the blue, I'm not really going to have to mix anything. We can use just the straight turquoise. So in 3 smaller bottles, I added 50 milliliters of the true turquoise to 1. That'll be our blue. And then in the other 2 bottles for our green, I used 35 milliliters of our 1% dye stock of the bright yellow acid dye, 15 milliliters of the turquoise, and then for the purple, I used 35 milliliters of our Hot Fuchsia and 15 milliliters of the turquoise. These are proportions that I know will give me the hues that I want to use today. Next, I took some plain tap water and filled up each of these bottles. This is going to give us about 50 milliliters of dye in 150 milliliters total, or approximately a 0.33% stock solution, where a 1% stock solution has 1 gram of dye dissolved in 100 milliliters of liquid. Okay, and I think, how do I want to do this? So I don't know entirely where I'm going to put the resists. I know how I would probably deal with the color sections on our resist yarn, but I'm actually struggling a tiny bit more to think about how I want to place the colors here. All right, let's do it. We'll do it sort of symmetrically. I think that might be an easy way to do it. I could dye the entire skein, but I don't think I'm going to. I think instead of dyeing the entire skein, I'm gonna dye areas and portions of it. So for example, I'm gonna do a blue section in here, adding our blue liquid dye, and then I'm pushing it to work it through. We'll have to dye the other side as well, because you'll see the color isn't going all the way through, but we can add more color. And actually, we're gonna keep doing our blue areas over here and over here. It's hard to predict how much area will be available outside of our resist areas. So I may extend these colors further, just trying to make sure I keep about half of the dye left. Okay, for our green, let's go in here. And so the two skeins I'm dyeing are actually gonna have the same colorway set up. For the most part, it's just, I have this, I'm setting it up sort of like a mirror image just because it's easier for my brain to think about it. All right, let's do some green over here. The overall pattern that I'm doing is very similar to some patterning I've done recently with resists, and it's one that I like. Now, I didn't add any acid to the dyes, but we have acid, the dyes themselves, but we have acid in our yarn, and so that should be fine. But I'm gonna try to treat things as similarly, as I can. But you can see we got some drips. The squeeze bottle is dripping some. That is okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm actually surprised moving the colors through that I'm not seeing a ton of breaking right now. Color breaking is when you would see, for example, we would see pink, like we've got a little pink halo around that purple there. And so I'm not seeing much of that yet, but we could see some later on. Okay, we're gonna do purple here. I want these colors to be bright, but the colors we're gonna over dye with, which I haven't shared yet, should be a lot deeper than these colors, which are bright, but not pastel and not quite neon. So I'm not quite sure if this is what you all had in mind. But now I'm going to go ahead and flip things over so we can keep applying dye in this pattern. But what we have is a purple, blue, green pattern. And here as well, purple, blue, green, and if we just flipped it, we could have them sit on top of one another without any issue. As I was adding our dyes on, I definitely used the most of the green and then the least of the blue. So I, in theory, can mix up more green if I need to as we go and dye another version of this colorway in the end. But for now, I think things are working. I did, after just flipping things over, I moved things around again to just sort of check the coverage in these areas. I don't know if I've made each of these areas wide enough to accommodate the resists I'm gonna add. In theory, I think we'll be adding enough dye that the difference between the white sections and any of the blue, purple, or green sections that are getting covered up will feel a little bit minimal. But I honestly don't know, and so we're gonna just have to see how that goes and if that factors into any differences we see. All right, we have our colors set up, and so now I'm gonna kind of rotate them like so. So we can have all of our like colors touching. And we're gonna go ahead and pop this into a steamer basket. Quickly wipe this up. I'll clearly need to wipe it up more. But now I'm gonna take all of this yarn and we're gonna go ahead and steam set it for 30 minutes. Now, we wouldn't need to do something hand painted like we did here. I could have done something immersion dyeing to have these colors layer onto the yarn and do something more random. There's many different things we could do. I just thought it would be fun to do what I've been doing a lot of lately in reverse and just see what I think of the results. It's been 30 minutes. Let's remove the yarn now. Ooh, we are seeing some breaking in here. There was a little bit of pink transfer, but look, we see some bright pink at the edges of our purple. If I can get that on camera, there you go. You can see some of that breaking there. And maybe there's a little bit of breaking on the green. It goes a little bit more blue at the edge. All right, I'm gonna set that aside so it can cool, because we need it to cool off so we can add the resist points. But there is no color that has kind of gone down into the dye bath. We'll probably reuse this pot for the next step, but I'll see you in 30 minutes or so. Here we have the 2 skeins of yarn that we've dyed already and the 2 that we haven't. And so I think the way I want to do these resists is in the middle sections of both. I'm going to take a zip tie and draw it tight. And I'm tempted to add a couple on to this section to make it a little bit wider. Now, in any area that is exposed, we will get some dye going in there. But by having more zip ties, the area in the center of that little bundle will get less color on it overall. And so that will maintain it. Now, as I go in here, I can see that we have a little bit more white there. So I'm gonna try to have this mostly on our blue section and have these be as close by as I can. But if I open this up, I'm not seeing white in that little area right there. So that is good. And now as for these other areas, we're gonna go more simple, just over the center with a single zip tie. And I'm gonna do that. Ooh, this is making this look like a chromosome. That's kind of cool. We're gonna do that on all of the sections. Now, when I'm dealing with this yarn right here, I'm not having to be as precise about where I put the resist because there's no color there yet. But I made these areas large enough that adding the color here really is not an issue. So hopefully things go well. Now, at the areas on the outside, the resist will probably be very narrow, similar to what we have with the zip tie. But towards the center, the white area will be larger. And the fun thing about the way I have this set up today, because we're gonna dye all of this yarn in one pot, we'll have a kind of a fun comparison when we remove all the zip ties. But now I'm gonna go set this aside so that way we can prep our dyes that we're gonna use for the overall resist layer. For our main color, I guess, segment, we are primarily going to use Dharma Acid Dye's Royal Purple, but then we're also going to layer some True Black onto it. So in theory, it shouldn't be a complete solid color, but I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves to measure out these dyes. And I measured out 3 grams of the Royal Purple Acid Dye and 1 gram of True Black, dissolving these dyes in hot tap water, not worrying about the total volume that I'm mixing things up in. I just added our 3 grams of Royal Purple dye to this warm but not yet hot dye bath that is around 24 cups of water. Some of the water was the same that I had underneath the steamer basket. So let's go ahead and add, let's do 6 tablespoons, 3, 4, 5. Okay, well that's 5.5. Okay, we'll add a partial one, so we're at approximately 6. And since it's not that hot yet, I'm gonna stir this up with my plastic spoon. Now, Royal Purple is a color that can glaze, which means that it can strike to the yarn really quickly, leaving more of what's beneath sort of visible through the surface, which is just something to be aware of. Now, I want to take our yarn This is our 400 grams of yarn, and we're gonna start dipping things in. Not necessarily dip dyeing, but just sort of lowering and raising things up to get coverage. Okay. Distributing it over, and we have sort of all the tops in the middle here. Not that we can see what's happening, but it's approximately symmetrically layered in the pan. Now I'm gonna let this continue heating up over, well, let's see where we are heat-wise in about 10 minutes. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about the black dye, but I'm waiting for a lot of the purple to sink in. And you can see we've got like a little bit of a pastel area there. We'll be adding the black soon. All right, it's been 10 minutes, and part of me thought originally I would just leave it be, but I'm curious. Most of the color is on our yarn in that time. The dye bath is looking very, very clear. Okay. I'm gonna put this down in a very similar way, because when I come in with our next dye, I'm gonna try to not move things. Ooh, but I will say, I see a lot of the green right there. That's kind of cool. That color is showing through. Here's where I'm gonna get a little goofy. This is an IKEA, oh gosh. What's it called? I don't know. It's an IKEA sort of like plant thing, but I'm gonna use it to pour, and hopefully by pouring with this, we can see more of what's happening beneath the surface. See, it pours nicely. Hopefully I do not make a mess. I have about 1 liter of water total, and it's from the Presoak. So there is some acid in it. Now, I've never tried this with dye. We'll see how it goes. I'll show you why I removed some of the liquid in a moment. That is so I can rinse out this container. And hopefully I will not make a huge mess in the process. But I wanted to dilute the dye a fair amount so that way we can hopefully distribute it really nicely all over the top of the yarn. We are nice and hot. I'm going to reduce the heat to low so we're a little bit less steamy. I have my safety glasses on. And we're going to come over here . And I'm trying to be a little bit even, but mostly focusing on this section of 4 where I'm adding the dye on. That worked really well. Oh my gosh. My hope was that by pouring the dye on a little bit slowly and being able to distribute it a bit, I could get a little bit more coverage. Whereas if I had come with just say this container right here and poured it, the liquid would have come out faster, and so I wouldn't have been able to put it as big of an area. So we'll see what that black does on top of our purples. Things have shifted a little bit more to the side. I'm not going to touch it. I was going to, but I'm not. So now I'm going to go ahead and cover this, and we're going to heat this for 30 minutes and check in to see how much dye is or is not left. Actually, I'm revising. Let's come back in 15 minutes, because then I can decide if I need to add more acid. I'll see you soon. Eek, that's high! Results of covering. I'm curious as to the color of the water. All right, it looks like there's not that much pigment left, but let's go ahead and use our tongs for good measure. You can see, all right, I see, well, some liquid dripping off of one of the zip ties. It is a hair purpley or pink. Honestly, that could be some pink leaking out from the purple that we mixed. But let's add more acid. 2, 3, 4, 5 healthy splashes. Give things a little stir. And I'm going to keep heating this for another 15 minutes. May as well pop the lid back on since I have it out today anyway. I know that there's some arbitrariness to the amount of acid that I add. I often go by feel and use that to decide if I think I need more. I mean, sometimes after 15 minutes, if there was a ton of color left, then I definitely would have needed more, but adding more here doesn't hurt anything. It has been 30 minutes. I'm gonna turn off the heat and we're gonna think about how we can do this nice and safely. Safely because if some of these other ties are gonna act like little pitchers, that's not what we want. But okay, that's not so bad. I'm glad to see that we have some beautiful purple and black markings in here. I do see some pink in the dye bath, which is not something I often see with royal purple. That again could be some of that pink that we had. Ooh, that's pretty. Where did my zip ties go? I think I flipped this one. So I am just gonna grab her from the middle, let her drain out some of that liquid. And this video wasn't even about like bleeding potential or anything like that. Okay, I'm gonna set it aside so it can cool for a bit before we go ahead and try to remove the zip ties. But I think that we probably had some hot fuchsia bleed back into the liquid. Ooh, fun. We had some resist there from just the top zip tie and not moving it. That's cool. Which one had the color? Because right now, okay, this one had the color. There I see some blue. I was like, which has the color? Because all I can see was purple and black right now. That's a really beautiful contrast. All right, let's give it a little bit of time. Let her cool off. And in a little bit, I will, once like the handles are a bit cooler, I will reduce the volume of water in here so that we will be able to use the same bath to heat set the next round. We're gonna keep going. I'll see you soon. Things look really similar right here right now. I can tell that this one is our white because I can see some white peeking through. But I'm super, super excited. Let's remove. Sometimes it's hard to get zip ties started a little bit. I find if I can pinch and push it, then you can remove it all the way. Oh, huh. This one, where did the rest of it go? Huh, this one had broken off. But now just to show you a little bit of the difference, it's funny because you can see that little spot left by the little hole that's in the zip tie right there in both. But the thing that I'd rather draw your attention to is the surrounding area. There's a little bit more pink, and if I pull this apart, there's more white here. Whereas in this section we have more blue, and we'll add blue to that section. But this yarn sort of up here is a little bit darker feeling, not because we're missing more of the black, but I think because we layered the purple on top of the blue. I think the only other thing to note right now is there's a little bit of white in one of these skeins from just some resist at the top. Okay, it's really just in 1 out of the 4. That's probably from just not mixing it enough. But now I'm gonna go ahead and remove the rest of the zip ties. In general, the process using zip ties is way faster than using yarn. I just want to make sure to pay attention for any that might break in the process. But in theory, I can use the zip ties over and over again. Going back in time one little lick, there was a hint of some blue transfer from one of the zip ties. Just one out of the 7 that we had on the skein. I did go ahead and get rid of that one, but we had a tiny bit of blue transfer here. In our skein that was bare to start with, you can get more of a feel of where the black added depth to the yarn in sections versus where we have mostly still the purple. We have that contrast there. And here we see it as well, but here there's a little bit of oomph from the green combination, whereas the blue and the purple, which this purple is very subtle, but they just give a different element into that base. And so I don't intend to do a flat lay like this again until the yarn is dry, but I'm curious about if I'm going to be going further when I layer on the colors as I did originally here, or if I'm going to be sticking more to these white sections. And so maybe the colorways will be indistinguishable from one another, and maybe they won't. But now I'm going to set this aside to finish cooling so we can wash it. And I'm going to go set up a steamer basket, and again, so it's ready to go. And then we'll start dyeing this yarn. The one nice thing about doing the dark areas first and then layering on the colors after is that it's easier for me to update how the bright colors are going on real time. Because if I started coming in with that purple that's going to be lower contrast, maybe I can pick one of the areas that has more black in it for that purple color so that way it stands out a little bit more versus going into one of the areas that has the lighter purple. And since that background purple and black is a little bit more random all over, that I couldn't really control the placement of as much. Of course, I could have dip dyed it and controlled for that. So there are definitely pluses and minuses to both. I think it's a lot of fun to dye the brights first because then you see those brights reappear as you remove the resists. And I always enjoy a reveal moment, but you also get a reveal moment when you see the more bright white that's left behind. And certainly you could leave it with just that white there, but it's fun to go in and add color. I definitely used less dye when I was hand painting this second round, mainly because I could easily see how much white there was I wanted to cover, and it was just a smaller area. Even though I did extend our purple, blue, and green beyond the areas that were seen with the resist. So this is really just giving me more control, and control can be nice at times, but there are other times when it's just fun and you may want to have something and over dye it. So you really can go either way. This is different from the order with steam setting and doing a tonal or something over speckles where those may bleed. That isn't as much of the consideration here today. The consideration is much more preference based. Because either way, with either step, you want to heat set it in the middle. And so that just takes some time and you can work around that. Okay, I steam set that yarn for 30 minutes. And I'm realizing that I should mark the other zip ties. I added a purple dash, like a 1 to each of them. We'll see, but if it's something, it'll mean something if we can't tell the difference between any of the yarn. Oh goodness. I need my tongs. Because the other thing I can do now is I can squeeze out some of this liquid before setting the yarn aside to cool. It may not look it from this little angle right here, especially because of the way things are laid out. Maybe that's a little easier to see. I don't know. Things feel very similar. Oh, I'm so curious. But it's gonna need to cool for a while before we're ready to wash it. Let's wash our yarn. So these guys have that little purple dash. The round that we did the bright color second have the darker ties, but I also connected things together. So hopefully that'll help us keep track of what is what. And hopefully we won't have any color bleeding either. But you never know. Okay, I see a hair. Oh, that purple there with the dark looks so good. Like over here, oh wait, no, that's green section. All right, there might be some of those like bluish purple areas that don't show up as well. But we have a hint of bleeding. Not bad considering all the color. I really like this colorway. And I'm curious what you'll think in the comments about me adding that black on top of the purple. Because I didn't want to just use a black resist today. I wanted to do something a little bit different. And I use navy and stuff all the time, so I just wanted to mix it up. But I like having multiple hues on that top layer. All right, let's see. Oh, that's resolving nicely. If there's anything in that round, I barely see anything. Okay, let's see. odd with the soak on. That time I'm seeing like a hint of some pink that I didn't see before. So we'll try one more rinse and see where we are. Again, still not bad. And I think it's so funny against the purples, it almost looks like this is a neon green. It's really not. It's more of like a Crayola green, but it feels more neon and juicy against the other colors. Okay. Oh, I'm super excited. Yeah. That fuchsia. Funny how like over time more seems to be coming out, but maybe it's good because we're rinsing it out. I'm gonna do soap again, and we'll see if the bleeding gets worse with the addition of soap. Yeah, we're getting more bleeding now. It's funny how it took a minute, right? It took a minute for things to start bleeding. All right, I'll keep washing it and I'll let you know when things are more clear. We're back to the light level. I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar into here and just let things soak a little bit. Sometimes that helps. Another thing that could help is I could have added acid to the dyes that we were adding on after the resists, because that could have diluted the acid from the pre-soak. But yeah, I'll just let this sit a little bit, 5-10 minutes, something like that. Sometimes a little bit of acid in the rinse, even though here I am rinsing out that little bit of acid that I added, can make a difference. Sometimes it doesn't, and if the bleeding continues, you may want to heat set things again. In this particular case, I think that I should have added a little bit more acid when I added the colors on for that second round of dyeing that I just showed. I think that that maybe could have made a difference, because I've dyed a lot with this proportion of black and purple and seen no bleeding at all. So my hypothesis is that the culprit could be those extra colors that I added on, but it's hard to say and things happen sometimes. Once I was done washing the yarn, I hung it up to dry and, well, let's go see the finished yarn. Before I tell you which set I dyed with our bright colors first and then over dyed versus doing the dark color first and then adding the brights, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the ChemKnits fiber patrons, including Tamaris Fanes, Don Jans, Bernadette Crum, Jessica Parco, Karen Siegel, and the rest of the names you see on the screen right now. Patreon is a platform where viewers can support the content here directly and in exchange gets a lot of fun perks, including early access to the Dyepot series, a monthly newsletter, and access to some behind the scenes going-ons of all things ChemKnits land. You can find more information at patreon.com/ChemKnits. And to all my patrons, thank you so much for all of your support. Now, I think it would be hilarious if I get this wrong, but this set here has that horizontal line through it, and I therefore believe that this is the set where I hand painted on our bright color first before adding the resists and over dyeing it. And one of the other clues is looking at how far I went around for some of these green sections, because you can see that coloration come through a little more. And in these similar areas here, yes, there is a little bit overage around the green, a tiny bit, but it isn't quite as much. And I think that I sort of kept things concentrated more on the white patches. But other than that, things are incredibly similar, whether I added the bright colors first or second. Now, could it have been different if I added the brights 100% all over? Yes. And could I have done something more random with color placement? And so then when I put the resists, maybe it would be across multiple colors. Absolutely. There may be times and reasons where you may choose to do your brights first and then add the resists, or do your deep and add the brights on second. I think the reason why I like adding our brights on second is that here we have a little bit of a lighter patch with the blue, and it's easier to control for that, say over here, because I can look through and see where those light patches are. Whereas before, when I just add the resists, I don't know exactly how big they'll be, and it's just a little harder to predict. But again, it's just personal preference. I think removing the resists to reveal the bright colors is so much fun. I absolutely adore the way that these colorways turned out. I love even the purple, which doesn't have a lot of contrast. I mean, it's slightly more periwinkle, a little bit less pink, but it's very subtle. However, it does really pop in some of those dark areas, and I don't know, it's fun. I'm also really glad I poured the black dye on top of everything in the kettle to just let that randomly go onto the yarn. I think that that adds just another really delightful element to the colorway. I do think it'll be a little hilarious if I'm wrong for thinking which batch is which, just because, well, then that really shows that there isn't a huge amount of difference between them. There could be situations where we do have a bigger difference, and there can be color combinations where the difference is also bigger as well. I really hope that this video was helpful. I know it was helpful for me because I've gone back and forth over why am I doing it this way now? Should I go back to the other way? And I don't know, I'm having a lot of fun. Now on Etsy, I'm going to be listing these as dye lot A and dye lot B. But for all that there might be slightly more similarities between A and between B, there are differences between all four of them, and you very much could use all of them in one project. I just might alternate A, B, just to blend things a little bit more, but both of the B skeins are not perfectly matched, and neither are both of the A skeins. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I like to catalog my yarn dyeing adventures in video form, almost like it was a lab notebook from back when I did research. I find this really helpful because then I can refer back and see what I did do, what I didn't do, and think about how I might want to tweak things to move forward. And in the off chance I want to replicate something, well, then I have a video in addition to written notes so I can see what I did. Now, I invite all of you to modify what I've done or even try my recipes, my techniques for yourself. Sometimes I get comments from people asking me, oh, I hope it's okay, I started doing this too. And yes, it's okay. That's why I make these videos, because I like taking risks with color, and sometimes some of the things that I do that, well, this isn't an off-the-wall one, but sometimes I do things that may be a little off the wall, and then I absolutely adore the results, and then go after it again and again. And so by trying and experimenting with new things, maybe you'll see something in one of my videos that piques your interest and then you want to try yourself, or maybe you'll see something in a video that you find interesting, but you don't like the results. So maybe then you decide, I'll let Rebecca try that one. I don't think I'll go for that myself. And all that is just perfect. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. I post at least twice a week, and we have a lot of fun and sometimes do live streams. And so if your notifications are on, you're more likely to be notified when I go live. Thank you so much for watching.